Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, president of Dale Carnegie Training Tokyo. My special guest today is an old friend of mine, Cairo Marsh, who is the president of Relativ Japan. Cairo, welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for hosting us. And you've got the whole building here. That's very impressive for Relativ. Very good.
It's a small building, but thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for letting us use your space here. So, Cairo, how is it that you are running Relativ in Japan? Here's the backstory, and how did you get to Japan?
How did I get to Japan? That's a personal story. Maybe I'll leave it out. But no, I think I just had an opportunity because my career in New York. So I'm from New York. From the Bronx. Originally lived in Brooklyn 10 years. Was working in Manhattan, and my career in New York sort of had hit a point where it's going to take a while to get to that next step. And so I was at a point where I was like, how can I develop or evolve? And I'd made a personal choice. There's a chance to evolve personally by getting new challenges, new experiences. And I had some friends and some people I was interested in getting to know better out here. And so that brought me out back 14 years ago.
14 years ago?
Yeah.
So have you been here continuously for those 14 years?
Absolutely.
Wow,
Absolutely.
Okay. So once you get here, it's hard to leave.
Yeah, well, I came out on a tourist visa. So I didn't have a job. I just said, let me give it a shot and see what happens. So I came out on a tourist visa. I said to myself, well, tourist visa, you get 3 months. I figured I could do a border run. I'll give myself 6 months and see if I find something within 6 months. If not, then I'll head back. And I tried it. I got 6 months in Japan, probably learned a lot. I had an interesting culture experience. If I'm able to find an opportunity and maintain that, then we'll see where that takes me. And 14 years later, still here.
So what happened? How did you get a job here? What were you doing?
Luck, I guess. I think you can't discount luck in anything. And I think that for me, I had a good career in the U.S. in marketing and advertising. I had a network of people who supported me in the U.S. They introduced me to people out here in Japan. And basically, I got an opportunity at an agency in Japan through that network here. It took me a while. It took me literally, I gave myself 6 months. I think I got an official offer at month 5.5.
Right.
So it just got under the wire. There's some points where I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going back. But it all worked out, fortunately.
Yeah, and we met when you were running another agency. So
yeah, that was the agency I came in over. Yeah.
Okay. But you came in as the president. That was pretty impressive.
Well, I actually didn't come in as the president. I came in as sort of the head of digital and data.
Right.
And serendipity. They had the president who brought me in. He had some challenges coming out of 3/11. So 3/11 created a lot of business challenges, and the organization decided to go in a slightly different direction. I was fortunate enough to be there and fortunate enough to have enough credibility amongst people in Asia Pacific who gave me the opportunity to take over after him. So I ended up at that agency for 6 years, 3 years of which I was running digital and data, 3 years I was running the office.
Yeah, that's right. When I met you, you were the president of the agency. And then after that, you started Relativ. You decided to do your own thing again, right?
Yep.
And so that's pretty amazing. You start from zero in Japan. Okay, you've been working for another agency, but to start in Japan, anything, how do you get people to come and work for you? How do you convince people? Because, we often talk in this podcast where people have done that. They've actually started something from nothing that often for Japanese, it's their parents, what they think about the company, the grandparents, what they think about the company, and they go, foreign company, foreign president, won't last, dangerous. You should go and join a solid Japanese company. Go to Dentsu, Hakuhodo.
Of course.
So how did you convince people to come on board?
Look, I think one, I was lucky because we started the company with a core group that I had worked with at the old agency. And so I was fortunate enough to have some people who believed in me from my time in running that they were willing to follow me and be a part of the establishment of Relativ. So that team, that group of people is still our foundation. Pretty much all of them are still here, coming out 8 years later. And so I've been blessed by that, by having people that I can trust and work with. So that's the base. And then after that, it's about expansion and finding different people. I do think that, there's an audience in Japan that is a little bit more conservative around what type of companies they'll go to, looking for more security than, let's say, we would have in the U.S. But at the same time, I think that there are probably a lot of people who are looking for different opportunities as well. For example, and this is not meant to sound sexist in any way, so I apologize, I think Japanese women are far more open to trying new things and honestly have a little bit more ambition around what could I make out of something versus the structure of that. And I think that's probably, and again, not to be in any way sexist, but I think that the market probably creates a greater sense of security for Japanese men than it probably does for Japanese women in terms of their career growth and development. So I think that there's more movement in that part of the audience. But I think it's really just about having something to offer people and delivering it. You know.
Also, you have quite a multicultural, very diverse workforce. Well, it's not just one nationality. You've got numerous nationalities here.
Sure.
You've got some Japanese, some non-Japanese. So that's also an interesting mix that probably is not that common, I guess.
Yeah, I guess not in Japan. Like I think you might look at our office and think we're in New York, which may be sometimes good, sometimes a little bit weird for the market. But I think like first thing, talent's the most important thing. Obviously in Japan, the ability to speak Japanese, in fact, being Japanese can be a core asset. I don't discount that at all. But the reality is it doesn't supersede talent. It doesn't supersede the ability to get the work done. So we have people from Vietnam, India, Hong Kong, the U.S., Europe. We do have a bit of a mix, but it's not because because they're good at what they do and they're willing to invest their time to sort of make something. And I think that's the most important thing.
And why the name relative with the asterisk? That's very unique as well. What's going on there?
The asterisk isn't the unique part. I'll tell you that. It's not a great story. I'm sorry about that. But the name relative fundamentally comes out of the principle that drives us as a company. The principle that drives us as a company is that relationships are key to unlocking value. And I've said this in a different context, but I think that when you are in a relationship with someone at a personal level, I think everything's personal, everything's human. When you're in a relationship, you tend to care more, and because you care more, you tend to create more value. And I think if you don't care, if it's purely transactional, you try to make it as efficient as possible, get the dollar as quick as possible. And I don't think that's right for consumers or for even brands. I think when you create a positive relationship dynamic, both brands and consumers benefit. So our goal is to do that, and hence the name relative, to represent what we stand for in that sense of relationships. The reason there's an asterisk is honestly, I tried when we were setting up the company, there's relative with the E, which was my original idea. No agency, I think, is currently using that. But that URL I could not buy. I reached out to the person that owns it. They're not using it either. Tried to buy it. They didn't get back to me. They didn't really make an offer. Relative without the E, that URL was also owned by someone, but I was able to purchase it. So we dropped the E, put the asterisk instead, and hence a brand is born.
How the real big decisions are made around branding on the name.
Exactly. But the only other thing about the asterisk that we like is that the intention is to also hint at that relative does have meaning, that it's not just a name. So, like if you look in a book or a dictionary, sometimes there's an asterisk on the word to imply meaning. So without the benefit of having the E, we leverage the asterisk to talk about the deeper meaning behind the word.
And, you've got a very diverse workforce. You've got some who've been here quite a long time from the very start. Then you've got people who've come later. What have you found works well to get people engaged behind the vision you have for the company and the direction you have for the company?
I think at the end of the day, managerial commitment is probably more important than anything else. Like obviously we have a handbook, we have principles. We try to use those principles of how we do evaluations and reviews. And I think that's very important. But I think it all I think it all comes from a personal level. It all comes from the ability of being accessible, being able to communicate the principles as an individual, and be able to live and manage through those principles. Because people believe not what you write, they believe what they see and how it impacts them. So what we try to do, perhaps imperfectly, probably imperfectly, is to live the principles of relative, not just in context of what we do for our clients, but how we treat each other. How do we on the same page? How do we have those mutually respectful relationships? How do we manage our team that way? And what I hope is when people interact in a non-project way, but when they interact with each other in the company, that they feel that those values are real. I believe most people do, But I think that forms the basis of our culture.
So it was a case of you, from your career, from your perspective, you had an idea around these are the values, these are the principles I want in my company, or with that group of people from the previous agency, did you get together and say, okay, let's come up with what's the core essence of relativ, let's make it together. How did you work that?
It's definitely the former, not the latter. Not to say that that's better or not, but I think that the learning that I got, talked about our previous agency, where some of us came from, where I came from, it was the opposite. It was a situation where, for a variety of different reasons, clients unhappy with contracts that were sort of assigned at a global level, or different dynamics between how this client functioned and another client functioned. You had a lot of misaligned relationships. You had a lot of people within the organization who felt that they were either being victimized by the client, being a victim to the contract. Why is that person working differently? And that created a sense of distrust. Now, we had a lot of people at that place putting in a tremendous amount of effort and hours and brain power to try to make everyone happy. And at the same time, no one was happy. And what I took away from that, and what I learned from that, is the importance of not just effort or intelligence or talent, but the importance of cohesion. And I think sometimes as agencies, and as an advertising agency, what happens is we sometimes defer, and I don't mean that in an assumptive way, but sometimes we defer to our clients' needs. The client is God. And I get it, the client's paying, so of course we are here to support them. I don't challenge that. But we have to identify our principles and take care of our people that way, versus sometimes being in a purely reactive mode. And I think in that particular case, we were trying to keep everybody happy, and we created an uneven structure that really created a negative relationship environment. And so despite all the effort, all the intention, without those sort of tight bonds, we weren't able to achieve the type of success I think we could have. And I vowed, and I continue to vow, to never repeat that mistake again.
So what did you do? Did you sort of write down all the things that weren't working and say, right, we're not going to do that, we're going to do this, we're not going to do that, we're going to do this? Or did you just start from what you wanted?
It's more what I decided I wanted, and that I learned what I didn't want. I think part of the process, and to be quite frank, part of the process is to, people believe, and I've had different discussions with people about this in the last months, how did you figure out what you want to do in life? And sometimes I think it's learning what you don't want to do. All of us would like to wake up and have that big revelation, aha, this is it. Sometimes it's like, that is not it. Let me try that. And you find it. And in this case, the idea of relativ, the importance of relationships, was experiencing the absence of it, really sort of crystallized why that matters to me. But it also crystallized to me, I think, the value of relationships for the individuals at a company, for the people that they serve, in a way to contribute and do a bit of greater good, where it's more than just transactional. It's about creating better value. And that really crystallized that opportunity for me in doing that.
And so you come up with the ideas, as you say, and you've got the principles. But as you also say, it's not what's written down, it's what's executed. It's what's happening on a daily basis. It's how you are on a daily basis. So what would be, say, there's probably, trying to pick your favourite children here, but of those principles or drivers for you in the company, what's sort of the most key, or one of the most key principles for you, as an example of the sort of things that you're thinking?
Yeah, I think it's really tough, and I think it's really tough to nail down to a simple one. But I think that we, including, like, whether you're a leader or a team member or whatever it is, we all have to be clear that we're all imperfect, including myself. Like, so I talk about what we're trying to do at relativ, and I think that vision, that mission is right. I probably haven't done it right, and I think together with my team, our team here, we're hopefully making it more right over time and bringing in different talent that improves us. So I think that humbleness is a key principle in order to do that. You can't believe that whether you have a good idea or a bad idea, that it is the idea, and then you have to be open to other people, particularly the people on your team, shaping and molding that with you. The other key principle, I think it's authenticity, for lack of a better way to say it, which probably goes hand in hand with humbleness. In order to establish a positive relationship, I think you've got to be both open, but then authentically yourself, both good and bad. I tell people all the time, and forgive my language, like I know I'm an asshole, right? Like, because I can be sometimes in a work context. Maybe I'm a little bit too direct or a little bit too whatever. But I ask them to forgive me for my flaws, but I acknowledge that they're flaws. And I also encourage people, and I actively try to do this, to call me out on them, because like it may be, in the right context, in the right tone, but please, because I need to get better too. So I think you have to be humble, but you also have to be authentic so that people can feel that they can interact with the real you. And I think when you do that as a leader, or you do that as a manager, you do that as a teammate, that brings people together because they know who they're dealing with. And I think everyone has the right to know who they're dealing with.
It's kind of a little bit antithetical to a lot of companies where the leader is actually the leader through position power, status. Organization gives them credibility rather than their personal, authentic self being someone that others would want to follow. So it's very interesting. You have those sort of two contrasting aspects of that. In terms of, you talk about people following, there's a whole trust aspect to all of this, isn't there? I mean, you've got multi-languages, multi-cultures in the company. You're in Japan. You're a foreigner. There are other foreigners in the company. So, building trust with each other, building trust with the clients, it's always going to be a critical part. And when you've got people coming from different educational backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds, different linguistic backgrounds, it's very hard to have a common view on what is trust, because trust could be seen quite differently across that broad spectrum of backgrounds, I guess. And most companies here in Japan don't have that problem because they're pretty much a monoculture, mono language, so it's pretty unified. Not perfectly, but pretty unified. But in your case, it's quite diverse. As you say, it's a little bit of New York here in the Juban. We're in the Juban at the moment, right?
Yeah.
So what have you found works well in getting trust with you and the team amongst themselves?
Yeah, like it's always a funny question, right? Because I'm judging myself and how people react to me. They probably can answer that question way better than I can, if I do it at all. But what I try to do in terms of gaining trust, just personally, right? I think it is really giving people license and space to be themselves, right? So I take license and space to be myself in terms of how I dress or how I look or how I present myself. We give the same license to everybody else, right? So there's no double standard, I think, where I want people to feel as much as possible as I feel. Now, obviously, there's some differences because, and I think these differences are interesting because I think it's contextual to the culture where, well, it's different if you're the boss or the owner or the manager and these different things. But I think we really try to give people license to be themselves. I think in showing that, you're also showing the team trust, and you're showing your coworkers trust, or you're showing your direct reports trust. And I think the idea is when you give trust, you probably get a little bit of trust too, because people then feel that it becomes sort of bi-directional. I also, again, and I'm repeating myself a little bit in the sense of being sort of honest. I really value honesty, which what I would say is part of the authenticity argument I made earlier. And the reason why I think honesty matters is honesty in your flaws, honesty in your screw-ups, which I have plenty, honesty in, in your feedback as well. Like I don't necessarily, and sometimes everyone doesn't love it. I don't necessarily go out of my way to sugarcoat if I disagree with people or I don't attack people personally. At least I try not to. I don't think I do, but obviously anyone could be wrong. But I think I try to be very honest about that feedback, but also give people the perspective of what drives that, and let them know that anything that I disagree with has nothing to do with them. It's really objective about the work, right? So that I don't want I think people need to feel, and they should feel, that they're valued, that they're appreciated for who they are. I still may have a very clear disagreement with that, but you can have both sides of those conversations. But I think that sense of honesty and that communication, I think, is really important. I think amongst our team, I think what we really do well is I think people, as a company culture, I think people seem very open and engaged with each other. Maybe that's because that's the culture that we've established. But you see a lot of interesting people I don't think would be friends going to karaoke together or doing different things together, which I think is great. And I think that the more that we're able to foster a sense of community where people, and I have some people here who I think would probably present as conservative, I have people who would present probably as very non-conventional, but so long as they all give each other the space to be themselves and are open to each other, then I think we're really building the right thing.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years' experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. You have dreadlocks, you're obviously not Japanese, you present very American, New York, Bronx, I guess.
Indeed, the Bronx for sure.
You take the boy out of the Bronx, you can't take the Bronx out of the boy, isn't that what they say?
And why would you?
And why would you? Why would you do that? So I guess, as an agency, you're very unique anyway, and you've assembled a team of, again, diverse people. So I suppose from a business point of view, companies who are engaging your team are thinking in terms of this is a creative house, it's a differentiated house, it's not going to be the same old we get from everywhere else. We choose these people because we believe that we'll get a better product or a better service or more value. So that's got a certain financial logic to it, I guess. But trying to manage that internally is sometimes, I haven't had to ever deal with a team full of creatives before myself.
Yep.
I don't know, is that like herding cats? Is that a difficulty? Is there a special thing about leading a team of creatives? Does that have another layer of complexity that maybe the rest of us don't normally encounter? What's that like?
Look, I think it really depends, one, on what people really want. But I think that it's fun in the sense that people will have different ideas. We did an exhibit for one of our team at a gallery over in Ebisu because she had some artwork that she wanted to share. So it was cool to set that up. We'll do a couple of weeks exhibit and do a cocktail party and make it a team event, but also build some of that. So you get into some different experiences and some different inspirations when you work with creative people, which I think is a beautiful thing. And I think for me, I love to play with ideas. And so I think that when you work in a creative environment and other people love to play with ideas, the ability to go back and forth and brainstorm and what if and use your imagination. I think I tell you, my people always ask me, why is advertising or marketing interesting? I think it combines the best two things I enjoy most: creativity, like just coming up with stuff, and competition. It's pitches. You got to be better than the other person. I love competition, but I love creativity. So I think being able to work in an environment where it's really about a competition of ideas and leading people who embrace that competition of ideas, I think it's a special thing in that way. I think to your other point about clients and maybe how they interact with us as a multicultural, non-conventional group, I think I see it as almost like a client filter to a certain degree, in the sense that certain clients may not be what you're looking for, which is fantastic. We figured that out real quick, as they say, like the second best thing to a yes is a quick no. You know? Yeah. And so if we're not going to...
Especially in Tokyo.
Yeah, exactly. You get a really slow no, yeah.
If you get that in Tokyo, that's a big plus.
Yeah, so if I can't get a yes, give me a quick no. If we don't fit the bill, it's best that you know, because if we appear in our demographics and our energy as unconventional, well, good, because we're here to challenge you. And if you don't want that, no problem, got it, you know?
And you talked to before about culture. I can imagine, as you say, the competition of ideas, the freedom of idea generation, the ability to be yourself, all of these things are very unique. Because most Japanese enterprises, organizations are about, okay, we've got a mold. We're going to get you to fit into the mold, and we're going to push here and squash here and cut off here to get you all into the mold so we're all the same. That uniformity, that harmony is what we value. But you've gone the other way, obviously, because you're not Japanese. I'm not Japanese. That doesn't appeal to me either. So, building a culture of that type of freedom, again, I imagine once people experience that, very hard for people to leave, because there aren't that many, I'm guessing, alternative locations they can go to have that freedom. I'm sure there are lots of alternatives they can go to.
Sure.
But not that necessarily that many of that culture vibrancy that they can go to and have that. So it's probably I don't know if you designed this from the start, but it's probably a nice retained strategy for people having a strong culture like that. What has been your experience around that?
I think we've done well generally with retention, which is good. I would argue that it's not that calculated in the sense that, okay, here's how we retain people. But I think it's the right thing to do. Like I think that a company should be designed. Like at my old, I'll tell you, at my old agency, I gave this speech, and I got a lot of blank looks when I gave it, which I was like, oh, this isn't working very well. But the speech I gave was like, why are we all here? And you're not. Anybody here in service of a logo is a crazy person. I don't get that person. No one's here in service of a logo. You work at a company in service of your family, in service of your financial goals, in service of whatever personal motivations that bring you here. Now that we're all here, we need each other so you can achieve your financial goals, so I can serve my family. We need to put that all together. But we all have slightly different reasons for being here, and that's fine. But here we have a common goal, right? The common goal is to either make enough money to enable whatever our personal dreams are, or to achieve a certain place in our career so that we can move forward. So as a company, I think companies should be designed to serve the goals of the individuals of the team, not to serve, the shareholders. You got customers and you got people on the team. Shareholders are good, but they shouldn't be the primary beneficiary. It's the people that are here and are laboring or investing, as well as the customers that you're actually serving. And so to me, that freedom makes sense, because your goals, like we have some people on our team who have to take care of families, so they need to work a certain number of hours. Go ahead, what do I care? Just as long as the work is done, do what you need to do. There's some people here who I really admire, because I think their mentality is similar to mine, in the sense that they're like, look, I'm here because I believe in our common goals. I'm not here for this manager, this boss, this logo. That's great. We're on the same page. So long as our goals align, it's fantastic. But I think that's what a company's designed to do, to serve its customers and to serve its people.
It's quite interesting to hear you say that, because you're American, but the typical sort of image I have of American business people is, shareholders come first, because that's attached to how much money I'm going to get, because I've got options, I've got shares, or I'll get bonuses based on a share price, and I can be worth tens of hundreds of millions of dollars, But you are the owner of the company. You talk about the shareholder, you are the owner of the company. At the end of the day, you've got a big feed bill here every
Sure.
month for everyone's salaries. You know, when you look
Sure.
at your P&L, there's one particular cell there that's got a big number attached to it, right? So it's got to work.
And that number's got to be met every month.
That number's got to be met every month. So
Absolutely.
there's always that tension between, you know, our goals in common, our goals individually against the health of the company. Like in our company, we have our values, but we talk about priorities.
Yep.
Your health, number one. Second, your family health, number two. Number three is the company health.
Yep.
And as you say, when people have family issues, health issues, that's when people know, okay, is this real or not?
Yep.
You know, how does Greg react in this situation?
Yep.
Does he look after the person, or is he looking after the profit, you know, looking after the money inside?
Yep.
And that's, you talked before about the authenticity and matching what you say, not what's written down, against what you do.
Yep.
So that's certainly interesting to hear that. In terms of, when you think about getting people to cooperate, dealing with mistakes, you said before that you make plenty of mistakes.
Making them probably today too. I don't know.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because for a lot of companies, particularly the classic sort of Japanese scenario is no mistakes, no defects, no problems, no errors, no screw-ups, right?
Yep.
That's the typical Japanese objective. So when people make a mistake, have some problem, they get punished. So people either hide the mistakes and just makes it worse, or they get scolded or whatever.
Yep.
And there's a timidity or hesitancy to try things, because if they step out, they make a mistake, they're going to get whacked for it. So how do you handle mistakes here? You've talked about you own up to your own mistakes. Great. What about when people make a mistake? And you talk about not sugarcoating things as well. So I'm just trying to get a bead on the non-sugarcoating with a mistake handling.
For sure. Look, can I just go back to one other statement you made right before I answer that? When you were talking about the focus on people. Just part of the reason why I feel that way, and part of the reason why I think that it's so critical that companies support each other, is a lesson that I learned personally in my life when I was going through some, not myself, but issues in my family several years ago when I was still in New York, and I needed some time off from work. And my boss at the time was like, look, take the time, do what you need to do, X, Y, and Z. And I was like, look, maybe I should just quit. It's not worth it. You know, like I don't want to put the company out, because this is my thing, not the company thing. And I like this company. And my boss at the time told me, he's like, look, if you have the right people, you'll make the right money in the long term. He's like, if you think about it simply from this month or next month, yeah, it feels like you're screwing up your profit. If you think about it in the longer term, if you're supporting and investing and working with the right people, the money will come. I truly believe that, and that's part of the reason why we work that way. Going back to your second point, though, about mistakes, look, I think it's really interesting, because I think everyone has a different approach. Like, and again, I am from New York, and in New York, we tend to be very clear about where things are aligned and where they're not. Japan can be far more nuanced around how that sort of message gets delivered, dealt with, interpreted. Again, I believe in honesty, and as a New Yorker, I get to be myself to a certain extent, right? And I don't think I should pretend to be someone else. I try to contextualize that when I talk to people around the value I feel for them versus how I look at a particular work. I think what we tend to try to do, what I hope comes across, not just from myself, but from other leaders within this company, is a focus on improvement, not on criticism. We don't spend that much time, I think, pointing out where people went wrong. We do go, look, here's what we're looking for, or here's how you need to think about it next time. But berating people for things that happened in the past, I think, is oftentimes challenging and oftentimes sort of a negative takeaway. We try not to overly focus on it. I'm not going to say that we never have ever said, well, I don't know if that was the right decision. Of course we have, and I think we should. But I think the focus of the conversations tend to be on, well, what does that mean, and why do we need to move that forward? I think we tend to have even more conversations while work is still in progress versus it's a fade out complete, where versus when it's done. So I don't think we really end up beating people up about mistakes. I think we challenge people about ways to move forward. One conversation that I remember I had with someone on the team, and it was around a decision that they had made, and I was like, I don't agree with that decision. And that person told me, hey, but you encourage me to make decisions, and now you're telling me you don't agree with it. I'm like, absolutely. That's the accountability and the credibility I'm giving to you as a decision maker. Not that you have my support no matter what decision you make, but I'm willing to live with your decisions and then still coach you on how I would think these decisions should go forward. So I think you need that sort of dialogue where you empower people, also make them feel comfortable. They're not going to be beat up because they made a decision or a mistake, but you still may give them some guidance on how we could look at this in the future. I think both are necessary in order to create a continually improving organization. And again, I'm being completely honest about this, I believe, and maybe I'm the wrong person to say this, but I ask people to give me that same feedback. I literally do. I'll pull people aside after me and go, where did I go wrong on that? What did I screw that up? Was that okay? Because I think that feedback, how do I continue to get better? Not just our team, but everyone here, including myself, needs to be better to get to where we ultimately want to be.
And I think maybe because you have a diverse workforce, you might actually get the feedback. But I know in a Japanese team, no one is going to tell the boss the truth. They're not going to tell the boss screwed up. They're not going to give you that feedback. It's very, not impossible, but it's very rare. Everyone, they're always thinking long term about their relationship with the boss. I'd rather not tell you. So you may have a little bit of a leeway here that maybe others don't have.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting because I think it's also individual, not just cultural. I find because I have some Americans here who probably would be hesitant to give me some feedback. But I have some Japanese people that have let me have it a couple of times in public meetings, and I'm like,
okay,
people are watching. Like, this is embarrassing. Like, and I got to keep my cool in that. And that's happened a couple of times, which I appreciate. It's a little bit uncomfortable at the time, but I appreciate that people feel comfortable enough to do that, because I don't want people to feel restricted in that way. But I think that, but I do think it's individual. Some people are very happy to share with me their unbiased opinion. Other people are more reserved. But again, I need to understand that if I am going to be better at my job and continue to improve.
If someone was going to be sent to Japan and they said, hey, Cairo, look, I've been given this job to run our organization in Japan. I don't know anything about Japan. I speak the language. What would be some advice you'd give them to be effective in Japan?
Patience. I was actually meeting with some people when I was in Europe a few months ago, and these guys were looking to build a relationship with a client out here. And they, first time working in Japan, and they're like, how do we make this all happen in the next few weeks? I'm like, it's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, if you're going in with that attitude, you're going to be very frustrated, I think patience is the most important part. As we all know, the market moves more deliberately. Decisions are made more deliberately. Even if they like you, it's still a deliberate process that requires a certain degree of patience. I think it also requires patience in terms of building those bonds of communications within a team. So I think that's probably number one. The only other key point, which I think is a key point everywhere, but certainly in Japan, is empathy. The ability to get outside of our heads as Westerners, where we come from a certain place. And, I think I'm American and, no criticism to America, but Americans always think that they've got it right and everyone else got it wrong. You're going to have to change that sort of mentality here where you need to step back. Some of those cultural biases, some of those cultural norms don't really work or don't really play in the market. So how do you step back from that and really be empathetic and put yourself in other people's shoes, in the market's shoes? It doesn't mean that you have to change, because you can never change. I've been here 14 years. Like you said, I still seem like a New Yorker. But you do have to be open and empathetic in a different kind of way and be willing, again, to be humble and to really rethink some of your assumptions.
Yeah, it's hard to be patient when you've got headquarters with their sort of shopping list of things they want you to fix, change, improve, execute on. And then you get here and you realize, oh, things move a bit differently here. I don't really understand the context. I don't really understand the clients. There's quite a learning curve going on there. In terms of...
Can I say one other thing about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
With the headquarters thing?
Yeah.
Because I think that's also interesting, as we know, when people get sent out via headquarters and they have a local team that they're working with, the local team doesn't take you seriously unless they believe you're committed to the market a lot of times, right? Because these foreigners fly in and fly out, they talk a lot, they don't understand the market. The guys in New York or London or wherever they're from don't understand the market.
Seagull managers,
Yeah.
right?
So people don't take you seriously. And it's really interesting. People always ask me, and I'm segueing a little bit, about, oh, is it difficult being black in Japan? I'm like, not as difficult as America. Only in the sense that, of course, Japan can be insular, but you can earn a place and you earn credibility and you earn perspective over time in a way that American racial dynamics are a little bit more fixed, right? So when you're a foreigner, you don't earn anything and you expect people to just understand or value you and you're going to be here for 2 years or 18 months, whatever it's going to be. It doesn't really work. You've got to get in there and sort of earn credibility if you really want to be impactful, I think, in market.
What about Japanese language? You know, you've been here 14 years. I don't know if you speak Japanese. We've never spoken in Japanese together.
Trying to embarrass me on camera, Greg?
No, we won't go there. But I'm just interested, you know, should they learn Japanese while they're here? Is it necessary? Is it important?
I think it's very important. I think it's very important. Obviously, I have not been very successful with the language. Like, I can speak the language at a survival level. I can understand probably what's going on in most business meetings, but I am not standing up in any way or shape. Giving a presentation in Japanese, I've never gotten to that level of mastery. But I do think, one, it's important for two dimensions. Actually, it's probably only important for one dimension. It's beautiful if you are perfectly fluent and you can deliver a comprehensive presentation in Japanese. That's amazing. Good for you. But I don't think that's why it's really important. It's helpful and it's a utility tool. But there's ways around that, right? And I think as a foreigner, especially if you're not long-term committed to the market, people don't necessarily expect that you would be perfect at that and that you would be, perfectly eloquent at that. So that barrier isn't there in terms of, they're not going to judge you solely by that if you're a foreigner and you're not necessarily a long-term commit to the market. But I think the ability to understand the culture, because language is culture, and the nuances and the norms and the what a certain phrase might indicate and the subtleties of it are really important for your own understanding of what's going around you, whether that's in a personal life or in a business life. So I think it's really critical, more so from that dimension than it is from, as a foreigner, you'll always be a foreigner a little bit in Japan. The closer you can get, obviously, the better. And I think there's value in that. And honestly, I wish I was better at it. But I certainly think that there's no substitute from really being able to understand the culture and the nuances at a high level.
And what would be your definition of leadership?
My definition of leadership, in a simple way, service. Like I think if I have to use one word, I think leadership is serving others. It's about figuring out how to help people achieve their goals in a common framework, right? So as a company, an organization, political, governmental, there's a common framework. You got to get enough buy-in so that we're moving in the same direction. But in order to get the people, the employees, the participants to move in that direction, you've got to be able to serve their needs. It can't be about your needs. Well, how do I help people enough that they're getting real value from this experience? So I think service is at the core of leadership.
Well, Cairo, I know we've got a hard stop because you've got a meeting you've got to get to. So we could go on much longer, and I'd love to go on much longer, but we'll pull it up here. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Greg. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, great. So please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.